What an amazing 24 hours. It started when Yevgeny Prigozhin said that the war in Ukraine, which his fighters have been fighting and losing their lives for, was not a just war, it was a terrible mistake. It should never have happened, he said. And he blamed the defense minister in Russia and Gerasimov, that's the leading general. He did not blame President Putin, but then things moved very quickly. He said that the generals had attacked his camp of his fighters, and then his men descended on the town of Rostov-on-Don in the south and said that they were in control. So at this point it became clear that this wasn't just a complaint, this wasn't just an argument, this was a mutiny, and also that it was a direct threat to President Putin himself. This is what happened overnight and how the events unfolded.
Overnight, Wagner tanks and armoured vehicles appeared on the streets of Rostov-on-Don as pedestrians stood around. In the early hours, Wagner fighters on foot took up positions in the city centre. Then the Wagner online channel showed an extraordinary scene. Their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, entering the headquarters of Russia's Southern Military Command, sitting between the Deputy Defense Minister and the Deputy Head of Intelligence, grumbling about the conduct of the war in Ukraine and demanding that the Chief of General Staff and the Russian Defense Minister come to see him.
We have come here and we want to get the Chief of General Staff and Defense Minister Shoigu. Until they're here, we're staying. We're blocking Rostov and going to Moscow.
He announced that he and his fighters were now in charge.
We are in the headquarters. It's 7:30 a.m. Rostov's military sites are under our control, including the airbase.
Wagner tanks patrolled the streets of Rostov. One appeared to be wedged in the gateway of a theatre, advertising tonight's circus performance. Russia's security services, the FSB, said a criminal case had been opened against Prigozhin. And a few hours later, President Putin spoke.
Any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood, to us as a nation. This is a blow to Russia, to our people, and our actions to protect the fatherland from such a threat will be tough. All those who deliberately embarked on the path of betrayal, who prepared an armed rebellion, embarked on the path of blackmail and terrorist methods, will suffer inevitable punishment, will answer both to the law and to our people.
By then, the Wagner fighters were queuing for breakfast at Rostov's version of McDonald's. Russian TV had woken up to what was going on. The announcer on Rossiya 24 said a counter-terrorist operation was underway in Moscow and in several regions to the south. It wasn't clear exactly what that meant. Traffic was blocked along the road to Moscow. Prigozhin had threatened to march there with his 25,000 men. And some military vehicles were sighted heading along the M4. At Lipetsk, people used diggers to block the road, so Wagner forces couldn't pass, although in places they reportedly broke through. A video on social media was said to show a Russian Air Force helicopter evading a Wagner missile near Voronezh. And a fixed-wing aircraft was reportedly downed. Russian forces apparently bombed the oil refinery in Voronezh, maybe to prevent its capture by Wagner forces. A Wagner telegram channel said civil war had begun. Putin's generals condemned Prigozhin.
Whatever your intentions are at the moment, as valiant as someone told you they may be, this is a stab in the back both for the country and the president. Only he has the right to appoint the highest military commander, but you are trying to seize his power. This is a military coup.
Roadblocks were erected on the outskirts of Moscow to prevent Wagner fighters from reaching the center of power, more than 1,000 kilometers from their stronghold in Rostov-on-Don. In a later TV broadcast, President Putin was reported to have spoken to regional leaders, trying to give the impression of being in control, even though he was rumoured to have left Moscow. It's not clear for where. This afternoon, a convoy of Chechen fighters loyal to President Putin were filmed reportedly on the outskirts of Rostov. A channel close to the Wagner Group said Putin had to stop them if he wanted to avoid civil war.
We've just had a couple of lines of breaking news. Yevgeny Prigozhin has reportedly said that he has stopped the convoy which was trying to enter Moscow, that convoy, to avoid bloodshed, he is no longer going to take it into the Russian capital. And we've also heard that President Lukashenko of Belarus, who of course is President Putin's closest ally, he has offered to negotiate between Prigozhin and President Putin. So it looks like there may be some movement there. Here in Kyiv, where I am, President Zelensky has spoken. Now, obviously, this is what the Ukrainians have wanted, for Russia to sort of fall apart, for the war in Ukraine to make it impossible for President Putin to continue. What he has said is the longer your troops occupy Ukrainian soil, the more destruction they will bring to Russia. The longer this person is in the Kremlin, the more disasters there will be. So a lot of breaking news and shifting events tonight in Moscow and in Kyiv.
Lindsay, thanks very much. Well, who is the man accused of leading this mutiny against President Putin? Like Vladimir Putin himself, 62-year-old Yevgeny Prigozhin grew up in St. Petersburg. Convicted of robbery and fraud, as a young man, Prigozhin spent almost a decade behind bars before becoming a hot dog salesman at the flea market.
As the Soviet Union collapsed, Prigozhin took advantage of the chaos which followed to get involved in various business ventures, most successfully running upscale restaurants. In 2006, he served visiting US President George W. Bush. But lucrative government contracts to supply meals were not enough for the man once dubbed Putin's chef. Despite denying it for years, he admits he runs the Wagner Group, a mercenary force that has seen action in Syria and various countries in Africa, making millions for its boss. Wagner Group soldiers have played a significant role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Prigozhin himself recruiting many of them direct from prison. The deal? Freedom if they fight, but warning his own firing squad would kill them if they ran away. In recent months, many of his recruits have been killed on the battlefield, leaving him increasingly and publicly in conflict with the Russian defense chiefs. This video in May shows him beside the bodies of his men. Laying the blame at his own paymasters.
Well, joining me now is Candice Rondo, who is director of the Future Frontlines Initiative at the New America think tank, and she's professor at the Center on the Future of War at Arizona State University. She's covered the rise of the Wagner Group since 2018. And Arkady Ostrovsky, who is the Russia and Eastern European editor of The Economist. Thanks very much to both of you. Candice Rondo, that breaking news that we've just heard, that Prigozhin has said he is now sending this convoy back to base. They will not be marching on Moscow right now. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's obviously a sign that he understands his capabilities and his capacity to overcome what Putin has erected as a sort of ring of steel around the capital of Russia is pretty diminished for a number of different reasons. Chief among them is he also has action in the rear down south with the Kadyrov troops in Rostov-on-Don, potentially ready to challenge his hold on power there. And of course, I think there's also a motivation for him to think hard about a political outcome rather than a military outcome, because eventually that is where this is going to have to head in order for him to survive as a leader.
I mean, obviously, everything has been happening so quickly in the last 24 hours. With that speed, will it be seen as a Putin victory right now? This
is the furthest thing from a Putin victory than you can possibly imagine. No matter what happens in the next few days, weeks, months, I don't think anybody can say that this is a positive development for the president of Russia. It shows enormous weakness inside the government and inside the military. It shows that the factions that have arisen out of the prosecution of this war are out of hand and out of control, and that Putin doesn't really have a firm grip on power. So much so, for the first time in his entire career, it's 20 plus years, 23 years now, nobody has ever raised arms against Putin other than Chechen forces outside of Moscow in the Chechen Republic. This is a very unique historic event. I think Putin understands that, and Prigozhin certainly understands that. And the fact that Lukashenko from Belarus is now stepping in is also a sign that those in the region fully understand the risks should Russia implode and devolve into civil war.
Exactly on that point, Arkady Ostrovsky, how are you reading developments in the last few minutes?
Well, things are developing incredibly fast, that's a cliche. Things in Russia we don't know enough of what prompted this statement by Prigozhin, if it is indeed genuine. So we have to be careful with the facts. But ultimately, I agree that the damage, whatever happens next, had been done. I mean, Putin had been weakened. I think this has been very disruptive for him. I think there will be further developments because I don't think this will just dissipate. I don't think that it's possible to return to the state of affairs as of sort of 24 hours ago. This particular episode might not come to any overthrow of power of the attempted coup, as Dmitry Medvedev and others have, former president, have called it. But this is not the end of a story. Putin has been rattled. This sentiment which Prigozhin has tapped into, the frustration, the anger with how the Russian troops are supplied, and most importantly, the sense amongst the Russian elite that the goals of this war that have never been clearly defined are becoming vaguer and vaguer as the war goes on, and it's unwinnable. So I don't think this is the end of it. This is possibly the end of the first act, and this will continue to unroll. And Putin, I don't think, can just let Prigozhin, disappear and go back to the barracks. As he said, Putin came out with a statement to the nation in the middle of the night. Effectively, the Channel 1 state news put out a news bulletin, effectively calling an emergency situation. The mayor of Moscow called it a counter-terrorist operation. So
sorry to cut across you. We haven't got much time left, but really briefly, if you would, you talk about public opinion in Russia. How much are the public seeing of all of this play out, do you think?
I think public is seeing a lot of this. In fact, all of it. Not only because it's playing out on social media and telegrams, which a lot of people follow, because people also coming out in the streets. If you look at the pictures in Rostov and Voronezh and other places, people actually out in the streets watching this whole extraordinary thing unfold. Not for the first time in their lives, of course. Russia has been through two of those coups in 91 and 93. But also it's now, as I said, it now burst onto the state television. The mayor of Moscow has called a day off on Monday, telling citizens in Moscow to stay at home and be vigilant. So everybody is aware.
Thanks very much. Candice Rondo, just to you very briefly. I mean, what is Prigozhin's next move likely to be?
Well, I mean, his next move is a mystery to everybody. I think it's very difficult to predict now. I think the question that we need to ask is where are the others who have joined Prigozhin over the last month or so? As you know, there have been a number of high-ranking colonels, colonel generals, for instance, Mikhail Mizintsev, a longtime commander for the Southern Military District, which is now, of course, occupied by the Wagner forces. Where is he? I mean, there are lots of commanders beyond Yevgeny Prigozhin who are clearly responsible for planning and executing this operation. And it won't be over if for some reason Prigozhin is dispensed with in some way, either via court or some other means.
I'm going to have to close it there, but thank you both so much for talking to us. Well, let's go live now to the Ukrainian city of Odessa and speak to the Ukrainian MP, Oleksiy Goncharenko. I mean, what do you make of this very latest development, the idea that this convoy is now not headed for Moscow? Is that disappointing to you?
First of all, that is a great day because the whole world saw the weakness of Russia, and the civil war started in Russia on our eyes. What will be next? It's hard to predict. I can't imagine how Prigozhin and Putin can coexist in one country anymore, and even on one planet. That's impossible. Country like Russia in country like Russia, there couldn't be two emperors. So one of them should, like it's about the Highlander, only one of them can remain. And I think that is a kind of a pause because Prigozhin showed his strength. I don't think that many people, even yesterday evening, believed that it's possible that he will take the Rostov, which is the biggest city in the south of Russia, and at the same time organized this breakthrough marathon to Moscow of his military column. So he showed his strength, but at the same time, probably Prigozhin is not sure that he can finish it with a besieging and taking of Moscow. In reality, this column, it's just several thousands of people who are moving on Moscow.
In reality, for the Ukrainians, while this drama, and it is potentially very, very dangerous, unfolds in Russia, presumably nothing changes for Ukraine at the moment. Russia still controls around 20% of Ukrainian territory. It doesn't make your counteroffensive any easier, does it?
I think that morale of Russian troops has dropped, and anybody in Russia. Our morale is definitely up because we saw how weak in reality is this huge country on the map, but really not so strong. Also, Russia, don't forget, Russia lost today. Wagner Group destroyed 5 helicopters and 1 military jet. So that's not a small number. So Russia today became weaker, that's for sure. Is it really now, is it an easy task for us now to liberate all our country? No, definitely. It's still the biggest country on the earth. It's still much more in population. They have more troops and so on. But everybody saw today that Russia can be beaten. You
speak about, this weakness. You speak about poor morale. Are Ukrainian troops, do you think, able to exploit either of those things? There are some reports that Ukrainian troops are trying to exploit it around the Dnipro River.
Answer on this question we will see on the battlefield in the next several days.
Oleksiy Goncharenko, I'm sorry, we're going to have to end it there, but thank you very much for talking to us. Well, here the UK government has called a Cobra meeting to discuss the unfolding events in Russia. Kami Nzeram is in Whitehall now. Kami.
Yes, Jackie, given how quickly things are moving in Russia, the government is understandably keeping a very, very close eye because, as your guests have been explaining to you, the long-term implications of this are still very, very unclear. And as Lindsay said, there is this underlying risk of Russia falling apart. What does that mean? In the last few minutes, Downing Street has confirmed that the Prime Minister has spoken to his high-level counterparts, so the US President Joe Biden, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor. And on a more immediate note, the PM's guidance is this, his question is this: what is the thing that the international community can do to protect the rights of civilians? And on that note, British citizens. The travel advice from the Foreign Office is very clear: don't go to Russia. And for those British citizens currently in Russia at the moment, use whatever means you can to leave.
Monitoring for a while now the potentially destabilizing impacts of Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. We're keeping a close eye on the situation as it's evolving on the ground as we speak. We're in touch with our allies, and in fact, I'll be speaking to some of them later today. But the most important thing I'd say is for all parties to be responsible and to protect civilians, and that's about as much as I can say at this moment.
The Foreign Secretary, James, cleverly chaired a Cobra meeting here at the Cabinet Office earlier, with the Foreign Office saying this. This is a real test of loyalty for Russian forces. Will they side with the president or the hot dog salesman turned paramilitary leader mutineer, Yevgeny Prigozhin?
Thanks, Gaming.